and welcome to this month's RLW. This is a very special one on a Friday afternoon, and we have a topic that is timely and incredibly interesting. My name is Heidi Ellsworth, and I'm the president of Roofers Coffee Shop, and we are here today to talk about selling sustainability, sponsored by our friends at LP. This is just going to be a great webinar that you're going to be able to use throughout your company. It really is timely in what's happening with our economy and in our culture. Today would be Kris Gray with LP Building Solutions. Kris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Heidi. Thanks for having me. Again, I'm Kris Gray. I'm a resource manager with Louisiana Pacific, or LP, at our Sagola mill in Sagola, Michigan. I guess a little bit about myself. I grew up in northern Wisconsin. I live in northern Wisconsin still. We're in the UP of Michigan, our mill is, but I live about an hour west of here in northern Wisconsin, about 30 minutes from where I actually grew up. And that's why I became a forester. So I grew up hunting and fishing, loving the outdoors, loving everything about it. I've got a cousin who's a wildlife biologist, and he's a little bit older than me. So I watched him go through college and get that job. And I thought that'd be something I want to do. And so when I went to school at UWSP, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, they have a big natural resources program. So I went in kind of undeclared natural resources and lucked into a summer job, forestry job, and really enjoyed that. So I thought, well, geez, this is why not forestry? There's far more jobs in forestry than wildlife. And I actually had a professor in one of my survey courses, my freshman or sophomore year, and he was a wildlife professor. And he said a forester will do more wildlife habitat management in one timber sale than most wildlife managers will do in a career. And it was like, all right, that's what I got to do. And after college, I ended up working for a paper company as an intern, which was kind of a timber tech position, setting up timber sales. And then I got a full-time position with them after a year of that, and was a procurement forester for a paper company for 10 years. And then pandemic hit and my mill shut down. So I had a little hiatus from the industry for just a couple months, and then worked for a utility for about just shy of a year, and then came to LP in the fall of 2021. So
wow, great experience.
Yeah, thank you. I've been the resource manager here at Sagola for two years basically now, and that's kind of a fancy title. I'm the forester for the plant. I buy all the wood for the mill, and I manage our sustainability program, as well as manage our fiber needs. So I buy the wood, I sell the byproducts, and make sure that we have enough wood on hand and in the pipeline to run the plant.
So let's go, Kris. Speaking of that, let's first of all talk about the importance of sustainability in building products. And specifically, we're talking about, wood. And I mean, obviously, that's what so many buildings are built of. So talk to us a little bit about the importance of that.
Sure. So basically, especially when you're talking about housing, homes, buildings, sustainability is got to be high on the list, because I'd like to be here a long time. My kids are going to be here a long time, hopefully, and their kids, and on down the line. So if we're building with things that aren't sustainable, that really hurts the prospects of the future. So, wood is a durable, sustainable building product. It's renewable, and it's when you break it down, it's made of carbon, right? And carbon is a hot topic today, but it's a naturally growing and recurring and renewing resource that we can manage. We know how to manage it, and we can promote healthy forests that do all kinds of other things for us besides provide wood, and we get a durable building product out of it. We have working, vibrant forests that provide places to recreate. They clean our water, clean our air, sequester carbon, and really all of that is still conducive to having a healthy and bright future. And for me, sustainability is really about the future. So you as a forester, um, when I'm overseeing a timber harvest or buying wood from a timber harvest, all the things I'm looking at, either when setting up a timber sale or it's being executed, it's being harvested, is what is that going to look like 30, 60, 100 years down the road? And all those things we're doing are to promote the regeneration and make sure that that forest is intact and continuing to function. It's not like there's a lot of building products that we use that, they're mined or extracted, and sure, you can reclaim the site, but you can't, make more of it. There's only so much of it available. Wood, we can grow more into perpetuity. So
Yeah. And we're gonna, I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I live up in the mountains, and that's exactly, I really, what you're talking about, managed forests are healthy forests, especially with all the forest fires and everything that is happening out there right now. I don't think that's ever been more true than today.
absolutely, yeah, it's really, and your part of the world is different than my part of the world, but in general, um, and I'll get into this later too. I'm sure we will, but you can let the forest just do its thing, right? Like, don't touch it, let it go, and it will go through its natural processes. But we've removed a lot of the natural things that happen in a forest and how forests are naturally evolved to work in the ecology. Fire is one of them. We suppress fire, right? Um, there's all kinds of things that we are here, and there's no way to disentangle humans from the current forest conditions. And like in the lake states, we live and work amongst and within the forest. My house is in a subdivision in the trees.
Yeah.
So we can't
Yeah.
let forest fires run through there. So
Mm-mm.
in the absence of those natural disturbances, we kind of get to play that role and get forest product out of it. So it's a it's a win-win.
It is. It is. And I think it takes, a corporate, I mean, as we always say, things start at the top, right? It has to be a corporate objective. And LP has really been on the forefront of that. And for everyone who's on, we're getting some great comments in the chat. A lot of people are here who we know. I'm so happy to see everyone. But a lot of, Kris, as a lot of roofing contractors also do siding. And so they are working with LP. We just had Christina Hill in here saying, we love LP, which is so great. So talk to us a little bit about LP sustainability commitment and what they're really doing.
Sure. And I mean, LP is we were originally GP, Georgia Pacific 50 plus years ago spun off Louisiana Pacific. And that's why we're Louisiana Pacific. They're like, well, the parents GP, LP. So we were at the beginning always a forest products company, but we had sawmills, we had OSB mills, oriented strand board mills, and siding is really kind of a newer thing um, in the 50-year history of the company. But we've always been a forest products company, and today we really have 5 pillars of that sustainability commitment. And any forest products company needs to be committed to sustainability, or you don't have a future, right? If you don't make sure you have enough wood in your wood basket, you can't operate your plants. So those 5 pillars are really governance, people, environment, products, and communities. And a core value of the company is do the right thing always. And it's a great way to boil down all of those 5 pillars, right? Um, my main my main focus in those 5 pillars are going to be, I mean, always people, right? Both our people and the people in our communities and our customers and their safety and well-being and all that. But then our environment, with the forest, the environment, right? Um, Products, and then our communities, um, our local communities that our mills are in, and that we, again, our customers are in. So if we do the right thing and we focus on doing the right thing, we're going to be sustainable. It's kind of, they go hand in hand. So,
It does go
and
hand
I
in hand.
right. I was just going to say, for anybody who wants more of this, we have a ton of information, really solid information on our website, lpcorp.com. And a really easy way to find it is just keyword search sustainability, and you'll find our sustainability report, our forestry brochures, um, our anything you can ever want to learn about LP and sustainability is there. So way more than I could ever, speak to in this. So.
And actually, I went through that. I went through the report. It was really interesting, very beautiful, and easy to digest. So you can find that link to the site and information on Rivers Coffee Shop directory for LP. So check it out. But we're going to talk a little bit about moving forward on, forestry management and particularly aspen. And so, Kris, before we go into this, I have to say, and I should have known this, but as I was learning and, first getting involved with you and LP and everything like that, and I saw that it was aspen, I was just like, wow, that's so awesome, because we have aspens where, in our yard, and they come up and they grow up through your grass. They are just like the most, they'll grow anywhere and in our region. And I thought, how brilliant. That makes so sense because they are so prolific. So talk to us about aspen and LP and forest management.
Sure. Well, I guess, and I'll say this, that I'm going to be speaking really from a lake stick centric position. Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, but it is the same tree, right? Aspen. Our two main species that go into our products are trembling aspen and bigtooth aspen. The aspen that you're seeing is going to be predominantly trembling aspen. So,
Right.
I mean, it's the same species. It's a little different, looks maybe a little different in the mountains than it does here in the lake states. But if you came to the lake states, you'd be like, hey, that's aspen, and
Right.
you would recognize it. So the management is a little bit different, but the tree is the same, and the life history of the tree is the same. So, and the ecology is very similar. So, it's a pioneer species. So I guess what I want to, and I'm going to try very difficult to keep my jargon, on where it makes sense. But there's when I met my wife, not to get on a tangent, I told her at the time I was a stumpage buyer, and she just nodded along. And it was like a year later, she was like, what does that even mean? You don't buy stumps. I was like, oh no, stumpage is standing timber. You buy standing timber from landowners as stumpage. Um, so I'm going to try to keep my jargon to where people understand what I'm talking about. But so aspen is a pioneer species. That means that basically, say out west, a big fire, even in the lake states, a large fire or a wind event blows down the current trees that are there. In the west, again in the mountains, it might be an avalanche. It might be just a standard placing fire. And an aspen can either blow in on seed. It's a very light seed. It looks like cotton almost, blowing in around June in most of the northern tier of the country. And there's a tiny little seed. It's like 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters wide, and it's floating on this little cotton. Cottonwood is a aspen species as well, and it just makes more of it. So anyways, that very light seed travels a long way on the wind, and it typically, where it lands, it's not going to grow. But if it lands in a fresh burn or a suitable, basically mineral soil, it'll grow from seed. The other way that aspen grows back and pioneers a site is, say in the lake states, we have a lot of mixed forests where it's northern hardwood, which is very sugar maple dominated. There will be aspens mixed through, because at some point when that stand was originated, there was one of those seeds landed in the right spot and grew an aspen tree. Well, they're spread out throughout that hardwood stand. Well, a wind event comes through, or in the early 1900s, people logged.
Right.
And basically, clear cutting was how you logged then. Well, when a wind event or a avalanche or logging happens to a stand that has an aspen component, and you open up the soil and open the soil to the sun, those aspen roots resprout, right? And when you said aspen's coming up in your yard, it's the roots of the adjacent trees sprouting,
Right.
From latent buds on the roots. So that's really what we do in forest management with aspen is that we take an existing aspen stand, we clear cut it or coppice harvest it, and those roots sprout back, right? And that's they do that for a few reasons, but you can't get that response unless you cut all the trees basically, or most of the trees. You need the sun. The sun warms the soil, that initiates that sprouting response. It's really about the temperature of the soil. So if you have a lot of shade, you won't get that sprouting response. And that, so an existing aspen stand that maybe at maturity has 300-400 trees per acre or stems per acre will sprout back at 15 to 30,000 stems per acre. And then it naturally, because it's a pioneer species, those are kind of definitionally sun-loving trees. They don't do well in shade. They need to be able to be in full sun. So as they grow and they get tighter, the weaker ones basically die off, and the growth gets concentrated on the more dominant stems. They grow very straight because of that. They're fast growing. They grow straight. Again, they're sun loving, so they don't hold on to lower branches. The branches die and fall off as the top branches keep reaching for the sky and the sun, and you get a very nice new stand, right? So again, and then it's a pioneer species. So one of the definitional things of pioneer species is they don't live forever. They're not long-lived trees. In the mountains, they can live a little longer, but the individual trees above ground are really, especially in the lake states, they're about limited to about 80 years. On a weaker site, 50 years, or a sandier, drier site, only 50 years. So, and they can live longer than that on really premium sites, but they're not in any sort of good quality. They're rotting on the inside. They're not really growing that much anymore. They're just kind of sitting there. So, in aspen forestry, forest management, you're basically managing that stand of aspen to be aspen, to maintain it as aspen. Because if just left to its own devices, it's gonna go through the stages of succession and become a different type of timber, a different forest type. It's going to move towards more long-lived species, more shade-tolerant species that are growing underneath those aspen trees, because there's aspen not growing under aspen unless the overstorage removed. So basically that conserves that timber type, and and that habitat type that's very important for many species of wildlife that we have. Edge species like white-tailed deer, rough grouse are a couple of the game species that hunters and land managers are very interested in maintaining aspen on the landscape for that. But there's all kinds of associated species of songbird and small mammals and everything that use that timber type. And so we can manage that timber type both to, we can cut it and regrow it very simply without a lot of inputs. And then we can maintain that timber type as, because the amount of ground being managed is very small compared to the whole, forest broadly. So that's really what we're doing in aspen management.
That, I think that is so interesting. It's a crop. It's basically, I grew up on a ranch or farm, but
it can be, yeah. Yep.
You're establishing all this wildlife and conservation too. So I love it. And then really when you look at, taking it that one step further, that wood is just a great building material for sustainability. Talk about that a little bit, Kris.
Sure. Yeah. So wood in general it's a fantastic building material. We've been building homes out of it for literally as long as people have been around. We've been using wood to make shelter. And one of the reasons it's readily available, right? It's durable, it's strong and flexible. And it's I'm trying to find the right word. It can be used in a lot of different ways, right? A tree can be turned into flake, this stuff, which is what our OSB and siding is made out of. I mean, that's what the aspen trees get turned into. And then you can press that into a board that can be, basically turned into any shape you want or need. But I mean, my desk is made of wood. There's wood paneling in my office. in most homes, the structure of the home is built out of wood, dimensional studs. So wood is it's very durable and it's very flexible. And I mean that in the way that it's literally flexible, but it can be used in many different ways to build and protect a home. So in that, it's very resilient and strong, right?
Right.
It reduces waste and emissions, and a lot of that comes from, if we're using wood is sourced from sustainably managed and regenerative forests that are forests no matter what, right? We can have a timber sale or a harvest, and that forest never ceases being a forest. There's a blip where there's maybe not an overstory, but the understory is still there. The ground level is still there. The carbon in the soil is still there. We're not removing any of that. It grows back, right? So it's still a functional forest from an ecology standpoint. A lot of other building materials they're just not sourced in that way. So even though they might store carbon, depending on what they're used for, the process of getting that material is very carbon intensive. A lot of carbon is released. A lot of, and then it's just you're not recouping any of it in
Right.
any of the process. Maybe once it's in the building, it's being stored there, but that's it. We're from a carbon standpoint, especially, wood is being stored throughout the process. So it's stored in the tree, it's stored in the soil of the forest. Once you use it and make a product out of it, and this goes on a home or in a home, it's stored in that home for 100 years, 50 to 100 years, and then unless that home is unfortunately burned in a home fire, that carbon is going to be locked up in that product in a landfill after it is changed out, or the home is demolished and a new home is built. And then once it's in a landfill, it's there forever, basically indefinitely. So it's in from my perspective, the forest is still there, right? Where that wood was sourced, the forest is still there, growing new wood, growing new trees, and being a home for animals, being a place for humans to recreate, cleaning the water, cleaning the air. It's still doing the things that a forest does. Whereas other products, they're sourced from oil, they're sourced from basically a small mine. That's all it. Once you do that, and there it is. It's not a functional forest throughout the process. So
Yeah. And not regrowing, basically. It's the new forest is coming in. Well, and when you think about taking that, and I want you to show your bag again and your flakes, because that is really what you're able to take, and from that create this great building product with SmartSide. So let's talk a little bit about how that process.
Sure. So I'm going to keep this high level, or as high level as I can. So basically, the trees are growing in the forest, right? And they're harvested. And in the lake states, again, they're cut by a machine or a person. They're skidded to the landing. They're put on a truck. They're brought to the mill, or in some cases, put on a truck, brought to a train car, and then brought to the mill via rail. Once they're here, that log or those logs are brought into the mill. They get the bark comes off. The bark is then burned for energy to power the process. And if we don't use all of it, we ship it off to a different facility that burns it for biofuel. So we don't waste any of that. It's utilized. And then that debarked log goes through what's called a flaker or a strand or a waferizer, basically a disc of knives that the logs are laying in that waferizer, and it comes across this way, basically with the grain, and makes these flakes. And these flakes are just what it says. It's a flake of wood or a strand of wood, and quite thin, but that's about the representative size. Those go through a process. They're dried. The fines that come off of the flaker, so this kind of stuff, some of that ends up in the board, but a lot of it ends up in our fuel system for our dryers. So we dry this flake. Wood is about 50% water when it's cut and harvested and delivered to the mill. We dry it down to about 5% water, or under 5%, I should say. And then it goes through a blending process. So these flakes are, they're just loose flake. they're dried. They go through a blender, which is like just what it sounds like, a big drum that's spinning. Our smart guard process is applied, so that's resins, wax, zinc borate is applied in that, in glues basically, are applied in that blending process, and so these flakes get coated with the glue, the resin, the wax, and that zinc that protects our siding, for 50 years of our 50-year warranty, our 50-year substrate warranty. Every single flake is coated in that zinc borate and those waxes and resins, and then it gets laid out onto a mat. There's a mat under a giant forming machine that drops these out, and it's not random. It's literally, they're laid, one former lays them this way, and then the next former lays them this way, and then this way, and you get that oriented. That's what oriented strand board, or OSB. It's the strands are oriented in different directions over and over until you build a big thick mat, and then it's pressed into a board, and that's where the strength comes from. So I've got a piece of siding here. There's that mat after it's pressed.
Yeah.
This is about that thick when it goes into the press, and then it gets compressed into this, and that's it's solid wood. I mean, there's the wood plus the resins and the zinc, and then there's a paper overlay on our siding, so that's where we get this wood grain that's actually pressed into it. So it looks like cedar. This is our cedar finish.
Yeah.
But again, it's OSB, and it's very durable. It's very flexible. And if anybody's familiar with LP, you've seen our videos where people grab two 16-foot pieces of lap siding and it's doing this. It's fine. It's flexible and strong. But that's the quick and dirty. The edges get shaped, and that's literally a profiled edge that gets cut into it, and then painted or primed, I should say. The face is primed. The paper overlay is actually pre-primed. It's soaked with resin and primer, so the face actually doesn't get painted here at the plant. It's already that color, and then we ship it off to either be to a contractor who's going to paint it before it goes on or after it's on the house, or to a pre-finished facility that's going to paint it before the final customer gets it. So that's down and dirty how SmartSide is made. Like I say, the key there is that the protection comes from the coatings that are applied to the flake, the individual flake. So there's protection on the outside with the paint and the finish, obviously, but it's protected from the inside from rot, and that's where we get that 50-year warranty. And then it's still functionally, and it's still wood, so it moves with the house. Houses that are made of wood move. They expand and contract with the elements, with moisture, with heat. So does SmartSide, because it's still wood. This still expands lengthwise, and it doesn't swell, obviously, but it moves just like natural wood would move. So it doesn't fight against the house. Some finishes don't move. They're more rigid, but they're put on a house made of wood, and the wood in the house is still going to move. So that's the short and dirty on it. So
I think, just listening to you and listening how that's compressed, I think you're going to have some people who are going to say, we need a plant tour. So be ready out there. There's going to be some plant tour requests going on, because I just find that fascinating and would love to see that process. But I think, it kind of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier with the aspens and the forest management and how that works. Now let's talk about why the aspen works within SmartSide, because that seems to be really one of the key elements of success.
Yeah, absolutely. So siding, you can make OSB out of just about anything. You can't make siding out of any species. So aspen is kind of king for siding, and part of the reason is it's nice white wood. So you can see it's very white. Those are aspen logs in that picture. It's a very white.
Those are big.
Yes, they are. Those are mature in my parlance, right? So the color is important, and it's also a clean wood. There's very little pitches, or there's obviously sap and water in aspen, but it's not like a softwood that has a pitch, literal pitch, that if pressed into board, it bleeds through and you can see it. Aspen has, that's the one thing is the color. Another thing is the the ease of management. We already talked about it. We cut aspen down, it grows back. As long as we implement the right silviculture, which is the science of forestry and forest regeneration, as long as we implement the correct harvest on the correct sites, it's going to grow back. And that very ease of use from a management standpoint, it's fast growing and it grows straight. So we get nice straight grain in that wood, very, very uniform. And it's fast growing. So from a wood strength property in hardwoods or deciduous trees, aspens, it's very soft wood, but it's a hard wood in the description of wood types. You want fast growing because then you have wide rings and very uniform wood. The difference in softwood or pine species, pine and spruce species, you want slow growing. You want very tight rings for strength. Southern yellow pine is not very strong. It doesn't make a very strong 2x4 compared to 150-year-old northern white pine. So anyways, I don't getting on a tangent, but so the wood properties very straight, very strong. And aspen's a low density hardwood, so it can take the resins and be pressed into this very dense board. I mean, cross sectionally, you can see how dense that is. It like I say, it's solid wood with no voids. If you held up normal OSB like sheathing or flooring, there's voids in there. It's not solid. It's not as solid as siding or our smart side. So aspen allows you to get that very uniform, very solid board that is strong, flexible, rot resistant, all the things we need in a durable piece of wood that's going to be on the outside of a home for 50 plus years. So
right.
And aspen lets us do that. Like I say, it takes the resins we need, how we needed to take it. It presses how we needed to press. It doesn't bleed any color because it's white, and it's very durable. So
Yeah, and it's fast growing.
And yes, and fast growing.
I've seen that myself. How fast they
Yes,
grow. Yeah. It's
absolutely.
amazing. I want to remind everyone, you can ask questions, make comments. If you have any thoughts in the chat, please ask them, because we are going to talk a little bit now, because really and overall, I probably should have said this more at the beginning. A lot of this information that Kris is sharing is information that you can share with homeowners or building owners as you're talking about really the type of sustainable building products that you want to suggest, or they may even be demanding. So this is the kind of information you can share with them. And part of that is sustainable manufacturing. Really, how is manufacturing taking the natural resources and putting them together, creating them, manufacturing them sustainably? Kris, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And in LP's smart side process, so I alluded to that we debark the logs, right? Well, the bark isn't wasted, doesn't end up in a landfill. It goes to a hog grinder, it gets ground up into a finer fuel substrate, and then we burn it in process heaters that heat our press and heat our ponds, all the things. I'm using jargon now. I got to get away from it. All the heats our process to make the siding.
Right.
And actually heats the plant as well to keep us warm. I mean, we're in the UP of Michigan. It's 6 months of winter most of the time. And then whatever we don't burn of the bark goes and is sold to a customer who then delivers it to locally here to a paper mill that then burns it for biomass for energy production. Some of our other mills actually sell to biomass utilities that burn it to make electricity for the grid. So none of that is wasted. That is, the little bit that's wasted is what falls off in the yard or in our wood yard. So we utilize the bark, and then after flaking, like I alluded to, there's some of these fines, these small pieces that don't end up in the board. We screen out the flake that is not, doesn't work in our board. And then that goes into a hammer mill, gets turned into basically wood dust or wood flour, and it's used in our dryers as a dry fuel. So we literally, our dryers can run on natural gas, But as soon as we possibly can, we switch over to wood fuel and we burn that waste wood product from our flaking process to dry the flake, and that uses up almost all of our fines. The only fines that come out of the plant are essentially the when we have to we fire dump, it's called. That's just a terminology, but basically if there's an upset, if there's a plug, we have to dump it outside, and then we actually sell that to another customer that specifically here at Segola that turns it into wood fuel pellets. So again, we don't at Segola, we don't, in most of our, I mean, all the lake states mills for that matter, we don't landfill any wood waste or biomass waste. It all gets utilized somewhere. So then we turn it into siding, and then any downgrade siding, we want to make as much A grade as possible, but any downgrade gets ground up and recycled into the board process. So we aren't wasting really anything. I mean, there's a little bit of waste in everything, but there's very little wood waste in the process, and we use almost everything. And that's in the forest management as well. A lot of people will, again, lay people or people that aren't used to looking at timber sales will drive by a timber sale or a timber harvest and see a lot of slash or the residuals, the tops of the trees, the stuff that's too small to be pulpwood or utilized in the process. And they'll think, oh my God, what a mess. Look at all that waste. Well, it's really not, right? So in a natural wind disturbance, like I say, where forestry is always mimicking natural disturbance. So say there's a wind event and it lays down a timber stand, all the trees get blown over. Well, are those wasted? If you're human centric in your thought, yeah, it's wasted. It could have been turned into smart side or boards or pulp or whatever. But naturally and ecologically, it's not a waste. That's all going to be, it's going to go through the decomposition process. That carbon's going to be stored in the soil eventually. It's nutrients that can be used back into the next generation of trees. And so similarly, the harvest waste or the harvest byproducts that are left on site on a timber sale in the forest are going to be decomposed into back into the soil and be stored as carbon and release nutrients that are going to go back to the next generation of trees and plants that are growing on that ground. So it's a very it's a closed process one way or the other. So whether we're using it or the forest is using it in its natural processes, it's all getting recycled. It's all getting used. So
good. I mean, that's really the key is how are we that life cycle. And LP has a sustainable forestry initiative and won the President's Award in 2022. So this is being recognized nationally and I'm sure internationally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know we'll talk about it. SFI or Sustainable Forestry Initiative it's a third party certifier basically. So we buy our wood, we source our fiber under that forest certification standard, and that lays out. I mean, it's a laundry list of things we have to be compliant with that our loggers are all trained. The loggers that we buy wood from are qualified logging professionals. That means they're continually doing logger education to make sure that they're up on the latest endangered species things, forest management techniques, water quality, BMPs or best management practices, and so LP requires that as part of our SFI certification. Sustainable manufacturing, sustainable, I mean, literally down to the packaging. So it's a very holistic way to prove to our customers that we are doing the right thing by the environment and the forest. So.
Yeah, so important. Okay, so contractors can take this and really start talking about the sustainability part of it, but then why LP Smart Side Trim and Siding is good. So let's go over this a little bit.
Sure. So I mean, we've talked about some of the good qualities and where that comes from the forestry end of it. I mean, from a just a ease of use. So it's wood. You use regular saws to cut this. You use regular nailers to nail it up, or screw it. Regular nails or screws to screw it up. So installation of SmartSide is very easy. Waste is reduced because of the longer lengths. It's more efficient to go on the home than some of our competitors. It's got one of the best warranties in the business. Like I say, a 50-year substrate warranty. The zinc borate that's in there, our 50-year warranty basically accounts for how much zinc leaches out of this over 50 years, because it is, and that's an inert chemical, but it basically, it's water soluble. So as it rains and everything else, some zinc borate drips off with every drip of water. But basically, there's enough in here that after 50 years, there's still enough zinc borate that it's rot resistant. That's what our 50-year warranty is based off of. So it's a very resilient product that has a long life. And again, it's made of wood, so it's easy to use, easy to work with. It looks great, and it's made of carbon. There's carbon in there, and you're storing carbon. And we've had life cycle assessments done of our siding products that basically siding is carbon negative. So all the carbon that is burned in the process of harvesting the wood, getting the wood to the mill, processing it into siding, and then transporting it to the final customer is still offset by the amount of carbon stored in those products. Wow. And in the next generation of trees growing. So it's a carbon negative. Basically, we're not adding carbon to the atmosphere with our products. We are storing carbon. We are sequestering carbon. And then wood products support the industry that allow that to happen. So you're from the West, you're familiar with, if you don't have industry or a market for wood, how difficult it is to manage the forest. You have to pay for that management. Whereas here in the Lake States, loggers pay for the wood. The landowner gets paid for their stumpage or their standing trees. And then they can use that money to help the actual physically harvesting those trees. That's management, right? That we're managing that forest. But then the landowner can use the proceeds from their timber sale to put back into their lands. And whether that's a small non-industrial private landowner who's going to improve their roads, improve their trails, plant other trees, diversify the habitat, or state, federal, county landowners, municipal landowners that are going to use that money or those proceeds from that timber sale to do that on a much broader scale and improve access for people that use the lands for hunting, fishing, hiking, recreating. So sustainable forest management is really a holistic thing that wood products support. So the final purchase, you might not realize that when you buy SmartSide or any other wood product, but you're supporting a whole chain of basic, that really feeds back to literally the ground that the tree was grown on, and supports those communities. Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. That is a great way to think about it. And I think also when you're talking about with your homeowners about SmartSide, when we think about how strong SmartSide is, protecting the buildings, I mean, from weather, we know what's going on out there. It's with the hail. I mean, we just had some huge hailstorms come through. And the fact that it's 50 years, that in itself, when you're talking to a homeowner, let alone the energy savings, the carbon, that you've talked about, 3,500 miles worth of CO2 emissions from a car. All of that can really be used in their presentations to homeowners on why to use this type of siding on their homes.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I think when as homeowners are talking about that, really having the talking points for contractors to talk about sustainability. Let's kind of go through that. I love this picture with the different colors and the siding, but you're at the kitchen table. How are you talking about this product? And really, Kris, I'm going to just throw in here too. that this next generation of homeowners, which we're seeing increased rates. I mean, already millennials are the largest homeowners in the country, but Gen Z is right behind them coming up, and they care about sustainability. And they also care taking it back to those communities that you're talking about, that it doesn't do harm, that it's actually helping those communities. Talk about that. That's our first bullet point, I guess, there, stewardship of the forest. How can contractors use this language and really explain how this is great for that person's home improvement project?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's an old saying or idiom or whatever that foresters like to use, is that wood is good, right? It rhymes, but it's true. So, like I talked about, how by using wood products, you're supporting the management of the forest that wood is coming from, especially from an LP. All our wood that we use for SmartSide is sourced locally, typically within 100 and 150 miles of our plants. So that's, we're not sourcing wood from the rainforest. We're not sourcing wood from forests that are in ecological danger. We're sourcing wood from sustainably managed forests. You don't have to worry about the rights of the rightful landowner being violated. We have a robust rule of law in the United States that guarantee. Every state has rules on how you buy and cut stumpage from landowners. What's fair. It protects adjacent landowners from accidental timber trespass. You just accidentally cut over the line, well, you have to compensate that landowner. So there's law and certification that helps basically reassure people that this wood product was sourced sustainably, and that forest is going to be there into the future, right? And in a healthy state. So that's just one aspect of it. Our warranty is typically longer, or not always, but a lot of times longer than the next generation of those aspen trees. So the forest that this was cut from is going to regenerate. One thing that people are always shocked by is that if you have say in the wintertime, there's a aspen coppice harvest, so a clear cut. You could walk out there right now and it's just, hundreds of yards of stumps. Well, if you came back in August, that's head high aspen whips or regeneration. It's literally one growing season. It's regrown to trees, and those are trees. They're just small trees. And those trees could be harvested again in 45 years on a good site. So this is going to be on the home for longer than the next generation of trees. So super durable, long lasting, and it supports local economies. So all our mills are situated in small communities. Sagola, Michigan it's hard to find on a map, right? Where our mill is. The biggest city nearby is Iron Mountain, Michigan. But our community that the people directly work at the plant, we have about 150 employees, 160 employees, and those are all good, sound, family supporting jobs. Well, we also have another 130 active wood suppliers that are from big to small, single operators to forestry companies that employ a lot of people. But all those suppliers are, again, that's supporting the wood they deliver to us and we pay them for, supports their livelihood and supports their families. And that's, again, within 150 miles of our mill. You multiply that by all the different LP facilities. You're supporting that wood product, and by putting that product on your home, you're supporting that whole supply chain. And like I said, going back, then indirectly, those wood suppliers are buying that timber from landowners, and that's supporting, either expressly in the event of an industrial landowner, supporting that landowner, or just allowing that landowner to keep that land in the family by having a timber sale and helping them pay the taxes for 10 years, or help them improve their land. So there's a whole basically supply chain that benefits from the final sale of a product like SmartSide. So I mean, it's hard to overstate how how big of an impact that one product can have on all kinds of ground, literally hundreds of thousands of acres across the Midwest and in Canada when you're talking about smart side. So.
Well, and if you think about these forests, these new forests coming up, I can't believe that between winter to August and it's over your head, but they're all taking in carbon too. And so they're cleaning the air for us. And so it continues, through that life cycle. That was one of the questions that we had was how long is the regenerative until you can actually use the wood again? 45 to 50 years. That you're right. It's exactly the same as the warranty. So that's pretty impressive. So Kris, as contractors are at the kitchen table and they're talking about this, we can obviously see here there's samples, and I'm sure if Christina or some of the other contractors, Jeff, I saw in here, and Alana, we're talking about this, are there ways, is there brochures, literature, different things from the sustainability report that contractors should be thinking about having in their back pocket as homeowners are asking more questions about sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, our sustainability brochure or report has a ton of information. I would say it's not very digestible for the average person. It's pretty long, and there's a lot of detail and technical detail in there. We do have our SFI landowner brochures or SFI brochures, and those are also available on our website. And those kind of dial into the literal, what SFI means and what we are by being certified to it, what that means for our forest management and how we promote sustainable forestry. That it's very digestible, and that is something that I know, especially in places where people aren't familiar with forest management, they might think logging bad, oh no, but yeah. Just that simple brochure explains the process, right, in very digestible terms, and it can help you start the conversation with someone and let them realize that no, these are still forests. Even after they're harvested, they're still forests. They're going to be forests into the future, and actually by having a product or having a market for that fiber, that helps that forest remain forest, because the landowner is not going to turn it into a farm or housing, right, or use that land for something else. It's going to remain forest because there's a feasible market for it. So that's one of the things available on our website. We have all kinds of other things for the contractor. We have a lot of programs, and again, that's outside my area of expertise, but we are literally riddled with resources on our website and through our pro staff, or the right terminology. There's literal resources for contractors to go on there and for talking to homeowners, but also for how to use SmartSide more efficiently and effectively. So
right,
a lot on our website.
So many resources, and of course all of that, or at least links to get there, can be found on Riffers Coffee Shop in the directory for LP. If there's any questions, please go ahead and get those. We're coming up on the end of our hour, but if you have any last questions, let us know. But of course, you can always send me questions through email at heidi@rooferscoffeeshop.com if you're interested in getting with Kris or finding out more about LP and how to get involved. Kris, I just have to say thank you so much. This has been incredibly informational. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi, and I enjoyed it. Hopefully, I feel like I never said all of the right things, but it's a huge topic. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having us, and thanks for letting me talk about forest management and SmartSide. I appreciate it.
Well, I think you did perfect, Kris. So thank you so much. And I learned tons. And so from the comments, people are saying thank you. And we did too. So I'm going to say thank you. And we're going to go ahead. If you have questions, be sure to get those over to us. But I want to thank LP again for being the sponsor and for sharing this information. Sustainability is so important in selling to homeowners, so key. So please use this information with your teams to get it out there. And be sure to stay tuned for our next RLW RLW, which is next week, and it is going to be with Java Technologies. And we'll be talking about how to use your data for business intelligence. So important. How to, the hardest part is getting that data out. And then you have experts from the industry who are going to be there to talk to you about this to use your data better. Again, Kris, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. And thank you all. Have a great weekend from this special RLW on a Friday. We appreciate you all. And we'll see you next time on Roofers Coffee Shop RLW. Have a great week.